I'd like to start with a question. Does anyone else experience low moods when you're sick? Now, this may seem rhetorical, but can we agree that when we feel awful physically, we're likely unhappy as well? How do we separate the mind from the body when we're sick? It's difficult, even for health professionals, and I'll tell you that I didn't realize the connection until my health began deteriorating. During middle school, I started experiencing strange physical symptoms. I became overheated easily, I lost my sleep schedule, I stopped eating at regular times, and I became more anxious, jittery, and depressed. When my parents relayed these symptoms to my doctor, they were quickly reassured that these developmental periods were naturally erratic and that my body will stabilize itself eventually. So I began to accept these symptoms as quirks. When I stopped wearing a winter jacket, I explained that I overheat easily. When all of my friends were growing and I stayed the same height and weight throughout my teen years, I cited genetics as the culprit. When I missed weeks of school from being sick, I said that my immune system happens to be weaker than most. And when my depression began to affect my aspirations, I claimed that I was simply a pessimist. Even though my symptoms intensified as time went on, the changes were gradual enough to where my body was able to adapt. So I assumed that constantly feeling bad was normal, because that's all I knew. Finally, during my sophomore year of high school, my behaviors began to change for the worse. I could no longer deal with stress effectively. I hardly slept, I stopped eating, and I became suicidal. My parents noticed, and they took me to a psychiatrist. I was given a few questionnaires that confirmed my mood disorders, and I was prescribed an antidepressant. During this exchange, I began to reflect on how quickly things seemed to spiral. Something wasn't adding up for me. Though I had been in mental disarray for a while, these unhealthy coping mechanisms appeared without any warning. It was finally a doctor who specializes in hormones who ordered the blood test that revealed that I had a near-fatal case of Graves' disease, an autoimmune disorder. And that's where my treatment and my journey began. So let me give you a snapshot of what happens when the immune system goes haywire. Autoimmune disorders occur when the body is unable to distinguish between healthy tissue and harmful tissue. As a result, the body reacts by attacking normal tissue. In the case of Graves' disease, the target is the thyroid. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped endocrine gland located in the lower front of the neck. This gland secretes thyroid hormones, which are secreted into the blood and then carried to various tissues throughout the body. The thyroid functions when the pituitary gland, located at the base of the brain, secretes thyroid-stimulating hormone, or TSH. TSH causes the thyroid to produce two hormones. These hormones regulate metabolism, cholesterol levels, nervous systems, muscle strength, body temperature, and weight, to name a few. Think of the thyroid gland like a heater. When the thermostat is broken, the heat production, or hormone production in this case, is no longer regulated. This causes the thyroid gland to spew out large amounts of hormone, and this is called hyperthyroidism. These are a few of the symptoms of Graves' disease, the classic symptoms. Often, with long-term hyperthyroidism, the thyroid can become inflamed and enlarged, and this is called a goiter. You'll notice that anxiety and depression are also listed. Often, the broad symptoms of Graves' disease can mimic those of psychiatric illnesses, which can lead to a misdiagnosis. However, because it's possible for anxiety and depression to exist without a specific physical problem, it's important to pay attention to other symptoms so that you can address the underlying cause when seeking treatment. These next three symptoms are more straightforward since the thyroid gland monitors heart rate, body temperature, and weight. So when someone experiences hyperthyroidism, their heart rate increases, they become overheated easily, and they experience weight loss. This last symptom is another inflammatory response that's particularly noticeable in the muscles behind the eyes. So the eyes tend to bulge out as a result. Here are two pictures of me that represent these gradual eye changes. The picture on the left is from 8th grade, and the picture on the right is from 10th grade. You'll notice that my eyes are more prominent in the right-hand picture than they are in the left-hand picture. So as this disease progressed, my symptoms intensified. Here we have the treatment process in action. When the body becomes overwhelmed with thyroid hormone, a condition called thyroid storm can sometimes develop, usually after a stressful event or a serious illness. Thyroid storm involves the sudden release of large amounts of thyroid hormone. This, coupled with stress or illness, can cause the body to go into shock, which can lead to a coma or even death. To prevent this from happening to me, my doctor started me on medication to lower my hormone levels. In the middle picture, you can see a scan of my thyroid gland. Since I'd had this disease for 4 years, it had progressed to a point where I would need more than medication to treat it. I opted for chemotherapy. Because the thyroid gland absorbs iodine, treatment is given in the form of radioactive iodine. This scan is from a radioactive iodine uptake test, which basically involved a small dosage of the chemical to see if my thyroid would absorb it. The fact that the gland lit up in the scan indicates this absorption. And on the far right, you can see the radioactive capsules themselves next to their lead-shielded container. Fortunately, I only needed to take 1 dose. However, because this capsule contained toxic levels of radioactivity, I had to be isolated, quarantined for 3 days. Now, this treatment process is gradual. So, even though I only had to stay isolated for 3 days, I had to wait a few months for my hormone levels to fall below the normal range. And this waiting was the worst part of the treatment. Because Graves' disease impacts cognition, I couldn't concentrate enough to read or even watch TV, so I spent most of the time sleeping. When my hormone levels finally fell below the range of normal, I was prescribed a daily thyroid hormone supplement. It took about a year for my body to normalize. I made up schooling at home and in summer school so that I could return to school for my junior year. Because of this, I am thankful that I will be graduating with my class in a few weeks, and starting college in the fall. It's okay. Through the frustration of misdiagnosis, diagnosis, treatment, and recovery, I learned to pay attention to my symptoms and advocate for my health. And now, I'd like to suggest a few ways that you can advocate for your health. Okay, but first, let me ask this. Does anyone else have a hard time remembering what your doctor just said to you as soon as you walk out of the doctor's office? You know, you're in there, and you feel like you understand what they're saying, you know, that you're following, but as soon as you walk out, you find that you've lost most of the details. For your next doctor's appointment, bring written questions and some way to take notes. Generally, the average doctor's appointment only lasts about 15 minutes. And sometimes, especially when you're not feeling well, it can be difficult to remember what they've said. So, this can be useful in that sense. Once you've created an effective method for that, you can organize. You're used to keeping binders for schoolwork. Why not keep one for your medical records as well? Separate each specialty by distinguishing it with tabs, such as allergy and blood test results. This can help you track trends and changes. Sometimes you might be able to see a correlation, particularly if you are the patient of more than one specialist. Once you've created an effective method to tracking your health history, you can then move on to tracking your family's health history, if possible. Though not everything is related to genetics, it's important to acknowledge that there often can be a correlation. It can play a significant role. You can start by asking your parents if they know of any health problems that run in the family, and then note their responses. This can be useful both in the short term and the long term, as you'll know what to look out for if you experience health problems later in life. Looking back on my experience, I wish I had taken my family's health history more seriously. Most of the females in my family were hypothyroid, while I was hyperthyroid. So while their thyroids underproduced hormone, mine overproduced, which means that we experienced opposite symptoms. I was unable to recognize this link, but my doctor was able to, which leads to the third suggestion. During your appointment, when your doctor asks you how you're feeling, discuss possible health concerns as thoroughly as you can. If you begin experiencing unusual symptoms, document them before your appointment. For example, if you simply say that you've had a cough, that could indicate a variety of problems. However, if you say that you've had a cough for over a month, that already directs the doctor's attention to more specific possible causes. The broad symptoms I experienced with Graves' disease did not worry many of the doctors I saw. For example, when they checked my blood pressure and noticed that my heart rate was abnormally fast, they asked me if I was nervous. Had I been more aware of my health, I could have told them that my heart was always racing, even when I was about to fall asleep. I also could have mentioned my family's health history. even if I didn't know the exact symptoms. And even if those symptoms didn't sound familiar to those doctors, they still would have likely ordered me a blood test just to make sure, especially if I'd never been tested before. This might have led to an earlier diagnosis, which might have led to an earlier intervention. And that's why this third suggestion is particularly powerful, because you're taking the information you've gathered about your health and your family's health, and you're articulating it to someone who's able to connect the dots. As a result, the patient and doctor can work together as a team, and that is the ultimate goal when we talk about health advocacy. So, people my age, let's be proactive about our health so that we can create storms that impact our world. Thank you.